Jan Sramek is the CEO and founder of California Forever. His company, with the help of some Silicon Valley billionaires, has acquired 62,000 acres in Solano County, California, which is north and slightly east of San Francisco, over the last few years with a goal of building a new community. So we've wanted to have you on for a while. We have so many questions. Scott particularly has a lot of questions, but there's been a lot of mystery around California Forever. I need you to explain exactly what you're planning, and I get a sense of why it was secret at the beginning, because you were buying up 62,000 acres in this area just northeast of San Francisco, centered in Solano County. So talk a little bit about what you're doing for people who don't know.
We are trying to get California to build again and solve this problem that we have. It's still the center of innovation. It's still this economic engine for the whole country. But it's the first time in the history of the country where people are moving out of a place like that. And we're doing that by building a new community in Solano County, about an hour north of San Francisco. And in some sense, this should be this is the oldest kind of business model in the world. We run out of houses. We should find some land that is not prime farmland, that is not sensitive ecological habitat, and build a complete community there. And then I think what's different is we're not building a subdivision, we're building a complete community. And so we're building something that someone who grew up in an old neighborhood like Noe Valley or the Marina built 100 years ago will recognize. A complete community with homes and apartments and schools and shops and jobs and churches. We believe that this can be a really unique economic engine for Solano County, which is a part of the Bay Area that has been left out of the prosperity that's happened here over the last 20 years.
So most cities just happen, they just sort of occur, and then cities build on top of cities, right? That's the whole concept, is like Rome has 10 different versions of itself depending on the era. Creating something of nothing, a lot of cities that do this in the history have not worked out well. In Brazil, I was thinking lots of different things they've been trying to create the perfect city. Why did you, besides California needs more housing, which obviously is a big deal, why do you think it'll work by just creating it out of nothing, where people weren't naturally going to build themselves or settle themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, first of all, it's in America, it's a fairly young country, right? And so almost all cities are new cities. Mm-hmm. And we have really good examples of cities that were started by a person or a company that turned out to be spectacular. Some of our most beloved cities in America were started this way. I mean, Savannah, Georgia, Philadelphia, Irvine in Southern California. We have a lot of really good examples of places that were basically started by a company. And I think what's the other part of it is we're building in an area that actually people have said before should be built. The U.S. Commerce Department, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the Association of Bay Area Governments, all said in the 50s, 60s, 70s that sometime in the 2020s we are going to run out of space in the Bay Area and we should build somewhere. And they all concluded that this was basically the best place to build. That by that point we will have run out of space in the Bay Area and this would be a really good place to build. And so there's a lot of precedent for why this would happen. And I think the cities that have the planned cities that have failed, I think they failed for two reasons. And I spent 2 years before I started working on this, kind of going back and reading the history of all of these projects, Brasilia and every project that you can name. Mm-hmm. And I think they failed in one of two ways. Either people were building them in a place where there was no demand, which is not the Bay Area, or the developers came in with some kind of singular vision they were going to impose on the city, and it's going to be this perfect kind of master plan. And our approach to it is very, very different. Our approach to it is very similar to how a place like San Francisco or New York were built. Or indeed, kind of locally, Rio Vista or Benicia or Vallejo, which is you lay down a street grid and you do a really good job doing that. And then you think of the city as a platform. And you don't say the houses are going to be beige and they're going to have these windows and this is where the residential is going to go and this is where the small houses will go and this is where the big houses will go. Instead, you do the bare amount of correct planning in the beginning, and then we let the city kind of emerge out of that. And a lot of different people and builders and architects and companies and residents come and they build their lives. And And I think cities are this unique invention that we have where, particularly in the society that we live in today, and there's challenges now, but I think cities are still the place where people with a lot of different values can come together and build something really special, and out of that disagreement and chaos and conflict, something really special emerges, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Scott?
Nice to meet you. So I want to try and, if I can, describe the tension around what I think some of the tension you're facing are the questions. So when I first heard about this, I love the idea of creating massive housing such that young people finally have their shot, right? I think that slowly but surely homeowners have weaponized local governments to restrict housing permits, and the American dream, if that's buying a home, is increasingly sequestered from young people. So I like the innovation. I like the idea that they're doing something similar in Florida where they're incorporating a city, tons of new housing units. I love that. The thing I think that sent chills down my spine when I read some of the comments from Balaji Srinivasan. And I think people are worried that is this new neo-libertarianism where people who are very blessed want to basically secede from the nation and want to create their own government, everyone has the right to create local politicians. But I guess my question is this rooted in opportunity for young people that haven't participated in the spoils that a lot of these people have enjoyed? Or is it a vision for a different type of society, which quite frankly just makes me scares me a little bit? Can you walk us through that?
I'm going to just put some update for Scott was just referring to former Andreessen Horowitz partner. This guy is calling for something like tech Zionism. He said his vision is to ethnically cleanse San Francisco of liberals. He has some scheme around colored shirts that people wear. It's demented, actually. But a lot of tech people are trying to take over San Francisco government with donations and their own mayoral candidates, which is their right to do so. Although some of the things that pop out of their mouth are just so heinous and stupid at the same time, which is very hard to do. So talk about this, because a lot of people feel like, given some of the investors, which I think does include Mark Andreessen, who is a big backer of Balaji, California Forever's connection to a movement that wants to build a place where tech elite can live under their own rules, or the idea that you're trying to do a different kind of governance, new kinds of governance. And I know Mike Moritz, who has been an investor, has talked about that, the idea of a new kind of governance. So perhaps separate yourself from that, or not, or just say what we're trying to do here is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're not trying to do any of that. And I think there's a lot of baggage that tech has created in building new cities that unfortunately we are at the receiving end of it. But my interest in this from the beginning was very simple. I really care about the built environment. I really think that walkable, dense places are special. I think walkable cities have amazing impacts on the sense of community and creativity and human health and knowing your neighbors and all of these things. And so for me, the primary interest has always been, how do we build more housing so there's more opportunity? And then how do we make the place walkable? Because if you look at these old neighborhoods like big parts of San Francisco or Georgetown or the West Village, it's clear that a huge proportion of Americans love them, but they've become these oases for the rich because we've stopped building them. And so these walkable communities today, working families just can't afford them. And so for me, it was about building a place like that. I have very little interest in innovating on, in particular, two things that tech has done. And the first one is there's this tech libertarian kind of floating cities, network states, and so on. I have zero interest on any of it. Balaji is not an investor. And there's also this kind of smart city component of it, what some other people have tried to do, and I have zero interest in that as well. I mean, we're building a place that actually is, from that perspective, really, really boring. We're building a place where if all we did was build a great combination of some of these old neighborhoods I mentioned, like Noe Valley and Marina and Mission and West Village and parts of Philadelphia and Georgia, Savannah, Georgia.
More affordable, correct?
More affordable, absolutely, because they are expensive because we don't have very many of them. If all we did over the next 30 or 40 years was build something that people looked at in 50 years, the way that they look at those places, I would be over the moon. We don't need to do anything
But you
else.
are going to get saddled with that tech thing, because given some of your investors, they're among the wealthiest people on earth. So, some of them have their nonsensical, I'm moving to Australia. Some of them, I'm going to go in space. That's a Jeff Bezos thing, the floating city. That's his dream of the world. Of course, in sci-fi, that's always a bad dream for most people and a good dream for rich people. So you're going to carry that baggage no matter what, given your investors, right? One. Two, they feel anti-democratic in a lot of ways. So presumably the governance here, even when Mike, and I happen to like Mike Moritz, talking about new kinds of governance, presumably democracy is at the center of that, correct? It's not, what's a new kind of governance? I don't even understand.
I think what Mike was referring to.
Yeah.
I think what Mike was referring to in that email. I think that's an old email from 2017. Was new kinds of governance when it comes to making it easier to build.
I see.
The thing that we've been obsessed about since the beginning is, why does it take 2 years to get a permit to build a small apartment building in San Francisco?
I just added a door.
And so,
it took me forever in San Francisco, but go ahead.
Exactly. And so if you look at the ballot measure that we proposed, the only innovation, it's an 80-page ballot measure, and the only innovation on governance that's in it, the only one, is it says it should be easy here to build buildings. We're going to do an environmental impact report on the whole community. We're going to study all of the impacts.
And
then we're going to say,
important because it's San Francisco. Yeah,
exactly. And we said, as long as you're building something that fits in here, you should be able to get a building permit in 60 days. And so that's the only kind of governance innovation that we have.
But the governance is democracy, correct? It's not like
absolutely.
You're not going to innovate on some, let's have a king or let's have, Mark Andreessen be king for a day or whatever. Let's not have him be a king any day. But when you were doing this at the beginning, you had to be very secretive, and obviously there was a lot of back and forth with local landowners. Did you talk about why you did it that way? Presumably because you didn't want the prices to go up like crazy, like, oh, rich people are here with their money bags. And you also filed a lawsuit accusing 40 Solano farmers of price fixing their land, which they've denied. So talk a little bit about that, because you've got to get the support of the community moving forward too, and the elected officials that are there now.
Yeah, on the buying the property quietly, we've done the same thing that, for example, Disney did when they were buying the property in Florida for Disney World, which is just standard practice. I think for us it was partially about the prices, but it was also, we felt that you could design a really great community here, but someone had to basically control a large amount of the land so you could place things correctly. For example, one of the things that we did is, in the ballot measure, is we doubling the security buffer around the Air Force Base here. And we would not be able to do that if there were 40 different landowners trying to build a project in the community. So that was part of it. And then,
just so people don't know, there's a big Air Force base nearby. For people
right, exactly. Which, by the way, one of the biggest challenges for the Air Force Base, number one, the people who work there are struggling to afford to live here. And number two, their spouses often commute 1.5 hours every day to Palo Alto because there's very few jobs here. And so we've had an amazing response from many of the people who serve on the base saying, you know what, actually, this is the best thing that's happened to the base. And then on the lawsuits, the main thing I would say is we've settled the majority of them. There was a recent ruling in the case from the court that basically said there is evidence that this happened, but we've been very reasonable on settling it, and we hope we'll be able to put that behind us soon.
So first off, I find your comments really heartening, and I also want to point out that masking your identity when you're a buyer is common practice. NYU does the same thing because, anyways, for a lot of reasons, you don't necessarily want the seller to know who you are. Get our greed glands going. Young people have been held out from the American dream of buying a home. What do you envision? What does victory look like in 10 years out in terms of the price of the home, the amenities? Paint the vision here for why this will be a net positive for society.
Yeah, affordability was a really big criterion for us from the beginning. And we designed the whole community with that in mind. And the biggest component of that is, if you look at what developers are actually building today, we've basically stopped building starter homes. And that's a big part of the problem. If you talk to people who've bought a home in the Bay Area in the 70s or 80s or 90s, their first home would be 1,000 square feet to 1,200 square feet, kind of three bedroom, one bathroom, small single family home. And then they would build equity and they would grow in it and eventually trade up. For all kinds of reasons in the real estate business, we've stopped building those homes. The community we have is unusual. The kind of we proposed is unusual in that California has a standard that says affordable by design. And what it basically says is if you can build a walkable community where you have row houses and ADUs and small apartment buildings, they can be affordable by design. You can actually build units that you can buy that are not deed restricted from the beginning. And so I think we would have homes or apartments starting at probably $400,000, which even by Solano County standards is really affordable. I mean, you can't buy a new home here for $400,000. And we do that by really innovating on what we build and the density, and then using the land much more wisely in a much more compact footprint.
So what you want to get this built, presumably, correct? What do you think the timing is on this and how it's happening? And is there a chance it wouldn't happen and that it couldn't happen? What do you need to succeed to go forward? And certainly there's interest in more housing in California. That said, a lot of people are in fact moving back. All those people who insulted California on their way out are now, AI is back. Like there's a lot of, you can see it in San Francisco and the Palo Alto area. There's real growth, and Google killed it they haven't moved anywhere. There's other things. So there's a little more excitement around living in California than there was a year ago, even, or 2 years, or a couple of years when you started this. What is the prospects, and what's your biggest challenge? And if you had to go back and repair a mistake you made, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I started this 8 years ago, not 2 years ago. I've been working on this for 8 years.
That's right.
And so we've been through the whole cycle in California of excited, people are leaving, people are coming back. I think to your point of people are coming back to California, that makes the need for this even more prescient. Because if the AI boom continues and the salaries continue in the Bay Area, that's going to just increase the pressure on the housing market, and it's going to be harder and harder and harder for working families to stay in San Francisco or in Palo Alto. And so I think the AI boom is just another huge reason for why this needs to happen, because the Bay Area needs more housing. Otherwise, it's just going to be an oasis of the rich. In terms of what we would do differently, I think we would have liked to introduce the project to the community differently. We were preparing for that when Connor wrote the article. We were probably a month away from
the
being able...
New York Times reporter, yeah.
Exactly. We were about a month away from wanting to talk about it. I also wish that some of the elected officials had kept more of an open mind instead of condemning the project in the beginning. I think it's totally fair for people to say, this looks like a really big idea. I'm not sure it works, but I'm going to stay open-minded and I'm going to look at it when there's more details. I think a lot of people rush to conclusions without merit. And I think that's particularly concerning when they have presided over the situation getting worse and worse and worse for working families for the last 20 years, and they haven't been able to do anything about it. And I think we should be a bit more open, to Scott's point, about new solutions, because whatever is it that we're doing, California is no longer working for working families. I don't think anyone is disputing it.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I just think when you're coming in hot with a lot of rich people and you've already experienced some of their behavior, you don't trust them necessarily, even if it's a good idea, which I think this actually is. Scott?
Do you see this more as the folks who are funding this, and there's nothing wrong with a profit motive, but do they see an opportunity to find a place where there's less zoning requirements and they want to be in the business of development, or do they see this as an opportunity? And the two aren't mutually exclusive. A social ill. How important is it a new form of governance, or just bringing housing prices down? What are your investors up to here? When they sit down with you, what does success look like for them? Because these guys have enough. Well, they have enough money. That's ridiculous. They always want more money. What do you think their objective is? Do they see this as a social good, or do they see this just as a great economic opportunity?
I think it's both. And I mean, we've been very clear from the beginning that it's a for-profit investment, and over the long run, this can be a pretty good investment. It does require kind of a 20-year time horizon, which is part of the reason for why I went to the people that I went to raise the capital. It's much longer term, much more patient capital. I think for all of our investors, it's a I've started to say profit plus investment. And so if you look at the people who've invested in it, they all have causes that they really care about. And I think if you ask them, I can't speak for them, but for someone like Laureen Powell Jobs, I mean, a lot of her work has been about economic opportunity and economic mobility and sustainability. And whenever I talk to her or the team, those are the questions I get asked: is how do we make it more sustainable? How do we make sure that teachers can live in the community? The way you build it. How do we make sure that we have that it's not a food desert? How do we make sure that there's really high quality food available for kids in the schools? When I talk to someone like Reid Hoffman, I mean, for him, Reid is an eternal optimist. I mean, he believes that we can solve things. He believes that technology can solve them. And he believes that a lot of the innovations coming out of the Bay Area have really made the world better. And so he asks, how do we make the opportunity as broad as we can possibly make it? For someone like Nat Friedman or the Collisons, they are really passionate about high quality walkable places. And so we talk about design and how do we make this an amazing place? I think Mike Moritz has been extremely invested in improving things in the Bay Area. I mean, he spent hundreds of millions of dollars in philanthropy in San Francisco trying to make it better. And so when I talk to Mike, it's about how do we create homes that people who work in the Bay Area can afford, and how do we make it. The last discussion I had with Mike about, can we help nurses be able to live here instead of flying here from Idaho? I mean, that started to happen. It's so expensive to live here that nurses are flying in from Idaho.
Yeah, I think it's I think it is easy to be suspect of some of the people and intentions of them from the get-go because behavior. But I think that at the heart of the good part of it is believing in California. And one of the reasons I call my book A Tech Love Story is because I do believe in the great possibilities, and I hate what they've done to the place. So why don't they use the better parts of their nature to do things? Which is, I'm glad to hear you saying it's not going to be some demented.
I hate the term. I hate the term. I've banned the term internally, and I mean, if I can.
Cities aren't smart. That's why.
Exactly. And if I can just comment on the investors, I think when I started working on this in 2016, there was this popular narrative that kind of venture capitalists and billionaires in general are wasting the capital they have investing in dumb messaging apps, and they should really do something in the real world to make life better for working families. And then 3 or 4 years ago during COVID, the popular narrative was, how dare all of these people who've made their fortunes in California take the money and go to Texas and go to Florida and just take it away. And I think we found a group of people who really believe in California, who really want to double down, and they did exactly what people have been calling for. Invest in hard things in the physical world with an uncertain payoff that requires 20 years patience, and that doubles down on California. And so I'm really proud of the cap table that we have, and I know why people kind of see this as controversial, but these are just people who love the Bay Area and they want it to work for everyone.
Last question, Scott. Yeah. Go ahead.
I just want to say, that's not even a question. That's a great point. And some of the people on your cap table, I do not think a great deal of. But I think what you're doing here, assuming that you're being honest about this, you're exactly right. They're not going into space. They're trying to make this place more habitable. I think it's a really excellent point. What if you could say anything? What is the level of cooperation or non-cooperation from either the state government or the federal government? Have they embraced this as another signal of innovation that'll bring more people to California, or are they suspect of it and feel threatened by it?
The state government and the federal government is not a unitary body. There's a lot of different stakeholders in there. But I think what we've seen in general is people are really excited. Housing used to be a priority for the California government. To your point, Scott, it's become a priority for the federal government because house prices across the country have just gotten so crazy in the last 5 years. And so what we've seen is a lot of excitement from people saying, boy, if you can get the buy-in of the local community, we would love to help. And so I think the opportunity for Solano County, which is a part of the Bay Area that really has been left out, one data point that is incredible. In 2002, the average household income in Solano County was 90% of the rest of the Bay Area. It was about $6,000 a household less. Over the last 20 years, the gap has widened to 30%. The average household in Solano County makes $40,000 less than anyone else in the Bay Area. And the county hasn't gotten its fair share of employers. It hasn't gotten its fair share of tax dollars, infrastructure dollars. And so the opportunity that we've seen from state and federal government is to say, if you can get the buy-in of the local community, we would love to help. And I think there's a real opportunity to bring a lot of state and federal funds to Solano County and really make the county better for the people who live here. And it's a really special place. I mean, I moved here with my wife and 2 kids. We live here. We've made so many friends in the last year that we've been here. And I really care about it getting its share of the economic opportunity in the Bay Area. And I think we have the most credible plan to do that that's been proposed here in the last 30 years.
But what about the cows? What about the cows? One of the main towns there was Vacaville, which means Cowville.
That's true. You know, we have... it's a
teasing.
good question. I mean,
Just don't let Christy know.
Just bring in
me,
Christy.
everybody.
We're gonna build an amazing place for the cows in the greenbelt. You know what we're doing now? The community is going on about 1/3 of the land that we're building on. On the rest of it, we're building solar farms. It turns out that the sheep really like grazing underneath the solar panels because they don't have to stand in 105-degree heat in the summer.
It's hot out in Solano County, much more than people realize how warm it is because the Bay Area seems like a cooler environment.
You know what's
there.
the most special thing about designing this right? It turns out that it's windiest in the summer. And so if you design the street grid correctly and you orient it correctly, the wind can cool it off, kind of like it does on some of the islands, for example, in say, Caribbean or the Mediterranean.
Yeah, it's beautiful land out there. I love it out there. I think it's so beautiful. Well, in any case, Jan, thank you for coming on and answering questions. We'll be watching it carefully. You're right. You're 100% right. Bugging them to do bigger things is what I've been doing, and this is definitely a bigger thing. And they're not building space colonies, so that's always a plus.